So during this Lent, we've been discussing different gifts that come with Lent at no extra charge, I want to point out. We've discussed the gift of temptation, the gift of peace, the gift of truth, the gift of healing, the gift of the other. And today, the advertised theme is the gift of choice. But wait a minute, isn't this Palm Sunday? What happened to that? Well, I know Palm Sunday is not as popular as Easter because we don't get chocolate today. But Palm Sunday is important because we get to wave palm branches around. So, why am I not talking about the gifts of palm branches or perhaps the gift of a really good party? Well, obviously, I think I'll try to convince you there's some connection between Palm Sunday and the gift of choice. And you probably expect me to try to explain that. But I'm not going to do that today because Palm Sunday is also the beginning of Holy Week. And Holy Week will end next Sunday on Easter Sunday. And this sermon will end on Easter Sunday too, because I really want all of us to live into the drama of Holy Week this year. When this Palm Sunday service ends, I don't want anyone to think it's over, because Holy Week is just getting started. And I confess, when I was a kid, I don't remember this at all, really. I mean, we all went to church on Palm Sunday. We were given palm branches, which we waved, shook, hit each other as we rocketed around the sanctuary. I'm sure I'm not alone in that memory. And then one week later was Easter Sunday, was another happy occasion, full of chocolate eggs, hard-boiled eggs, other delights. I guess Jesus was in there somewhere too, come to think of it. But what I remember is going from one happy occasion on Palm Sunday to another happy occasion on Easter Sunday. I don't really remember any drama in Holy Week when I was a kid. And I guess, to be honest, I don't even remember Holy Week, to be honest with you. But of course, as I've matured and gotten into ministry, I have a much better understanding of the Christian faith, let's say. And I've come to realize the drama of Holy Week is really important. And you miss all that if you leave here today and you don't come back till Easter Sunday. So I really hope we will all take advantage of the drama that will be unfolding this week. Holy Week is actually perhaps the most dramatic part of the Christian calendar. I mean, we all enjoy Advent and Christmas, Advent being the 4-week lead up to Christmas. But the themes during Advent, if you remember, are love, joy, peace, hope. So they're all just kind of positive ideas, and actually they're not even that different from each other. Advent is great, but there's a lot of repetition as we simply wait for the metaphorical birth of Jesus. But Holy Week is very different, because Holy Week follows the journey of Jesus at the end of his public ministry. And the end of Jesus' ministry was, let's just say, challenging, to say the least. And Jesus' disciples, like us, we get to have our own reactions to the drama that was unfolding before their eyes. I mean, in broad strokes, Holy Week needs to at least include Palm Sunday, of course, a time of joy and celebration, plus a chance to push back against the dominant forces of the day. Jesus riding a donkey into Jerusalem was, of course, a parody, a lampoon of the parade that Pilate was having on the other side of town. If that's news to you, talk to me sometime. Maundy Thursday, which includes the meal we call the Last Supper. The Last Supper morphed into Holy Communion, a meal that began in joy, but turned into confusion and frustration as Judas first confronted and then abandoned and then betrayed his friend Jesus. For the disciples, Maundy Thursday was a time of confusion, disappointment, and confusion. I know I said the word confusion twice, but that's because that would have been the dominant emotion as that evening went along. Good Friday, Jesus dies. That's pretty depressing. The dream ends in tears. And then Easter Sunday, the Spirit of Jesus returns. Joy returns. The dream continues. Hope lives again. That's a lot of drama to put into a single week. Holy Week beats the crackers out of Advent for pure drama, excitement, and emotion. Holy Week, like real life, contains ups and downs, highs and lows, having expectations dashed, but also room for great joy and hope. Besides, if you don't participate in the actions of Holy Week, this sermon won't make any sense, but maybe that's not your primary concern. Because if we ignore the highs and lows of Holy Week, or if we ignore the highs and lows of our own life, then we cannot really talk about the gift of choice. If life was all rainbows and unicorns, there would be no gift in choice because there would be no choices to make. Now, I'm sure you want me to put a little effort into connecting Palm Sunday to choice. And actually, to be honest, it's not Palm Sunday so much as Holy Week in its full form. Because Holy Week is all about choice. We've already discussed that you all personally have the choice of participating in some extra services and activities. That's one choice we all get to make. But I need to lift up a choice that Matthew made because Matthew got it wrong, massively wrong. It probably wasn't really his fault, but he got it wrong. And his wrong choice has cost many lives over the past 2,000 years. Matthew made a choice, but we can always choose differently because Lent is all about choice. So, what did Matthew get wrong? Well, it's something we often get wrong ourselves. It's something I got wrong in a way that I want to share my own story. And I want to share my own story as a lead in because my story has better visuals. Years ago, my mother got into painting, mainly oils and watercolor. So sometimes when I went to visit her, as an adult, we would paint stuff. And when we cleaned out her house, when she left Guelph, I actually found some of my attempts at painting. She didn't throw them away. In fact, I found my very first attempt at painting in oils. It was a pear. I remember there was a magazine with a white page and a pear with a little bit of a shadow from the pear. Do you want to see my first ever oil painting? You don't. You really don't. Okay, now that was my first attempt. Now it's terrible, of course. No real sense of depth or release. And that background flourish was what do you do with the shadow? I couldn't understand what to do with the shadow. Okay, do you want to see my second attempt? Don't worry, I only have three. There we go. So it's still terrible, but there's a little more relief, right? And I still had no idea what to do with that shadow. So I still have the flourish. Now, I just want to show you my third attempt, but I should explain. I think we took a break. I don't remember, honestly, if it was coffee or lunch, but this third attempt was the same day, maybe even the same morning. Want to see my third attempt? Now, do you want to know why I got so much better so quickly? Because that's not bad. That actually looks pretty. I don't have a copy of the magazine, but that's not bad. It's because when you take a break and then you revisit things, you sometimes see them differently, of course. But when I saw the first two, I realized what was wrong with my head. And I'm sure many beginning artists do this too. Glendale can comment. But the mistake I made was I looked at the picture of a pear in a magazine, and then I decided, well, that's a pear. And then I decided, well, I know what a pear looks like. And then I painted what in my mind a pear is supposed to look like. And the reason I couldn't do the shadow is I thought, well, I know it's a shadow. I don't know what to do with a shadow. My first attempts were horrible, let's be honest, because I painted what I expected to see, not what I actually was looking at. And the reason my third attempt is dramatically better is I stopped trying to paint a pear. Instead, I painted what I saw. No interpretation, no conceptualization, no imagination, no thinking. I just tried to paint what I saw. And I think I can say the outcome was substantially different, right? And I didn't try to draw a shadow. That's just what it looked like. As we all know in life, it's very easy to come to a conclusion about how the world should work. And then we interpret everything from that perspective. We do not always see what is right in front of us. Instead, we see what we expect to see, or maybe what we want to see, or maybe we see what we would rather see instead of seeing actual reality. And I'm sure that many of you have stories like that. And Matthew made the same mistake, I believe. Matthew was so committed, and you get this from the Nativity story. Matthew was so committed that the idea that Jesus was the Jewish Messiah, he could not see the Jesus that was right in front of him. Because Jesus was nothing like the Messiah that was anticipated 2,000 years ago. In fact, it's easy for all of us to see Jesus we want to see. As one case in point, I often see Jesus on a bicycle. But I hope some of you are surprised that I flatly state Jesus was not the Jewish Messiah. Why am I going against 2,000 years of tradition? Well, I think it's self-evident, to be honest with you. If we actually look at Jesus and who he was, instead of just taking Matthew or our own interpretation. So here's, in summary, why I'm convinced Jesus was not the Jewish Messiah. For one thing, the vast majority of Jewish people living in Palestine at the time of Jesus did not see Jesus as their Messiah. Well, they were faithful, educated, sensible people. The fact that almost no Jewish people saw Jesus as Messiah should at least give us pause for thought. Why was Jesus not accepted by most Jews as Messiah? Maybe because he wasn't. Secondly, Jesus did not fulfill any of the important expectations of the Jewish Messiah found in the Old Testament or in Jewish traditions. As a short list, the Messiah was expected to build the third temple, to gather all Jews back to the land of Israel, to usher in an era of world peace, to end all hatred, oppression, suffering, disease. Jesus did none of those things. Moreover, the Messiah was supposed to liberate the people from oppression, which in Palestine in those days meant defeating the Roman Empire. Jesus did not defeat the Roman Empire. In fact, Jesus never even spoke against the Roman Empire. Jesus' harshest criticism was for uncaring religious leaders. Jesus, when you read the Gospels, did not even seem to talk about the occupation. So therefore, I claim Jesus was not the Jewish Messiah. But that did not stop Matthew writing his Gospel based not on the Jesus that was in front of his face, but on some anticipations from his traditions, which explains the readings we had today. And thank you, Rowena, for reading the second reading, because I don't even like to read those stories in church. But I'm about to tell you why. The first reading today was Matthew's version of Jesus riding into Jerusalem on a donkey. Well, riding two animals simultaneously, actually. In the story from Matthew, Jesus rode on a donkey and a colt at the same time. And if that surprises you, again, talk to me over coffee. It's a great story. Why there's two animals. But the point of the story, anyway, was about how people reacted to Jesus. Jesus had been visiting villages, teaching, healing. So he was popular enough to have a parade. Now, the lectionary wanted us to stop reading right there. But I felt compelled to add two stories that follow just a little bit later. The parable of the two sons, the parable of the wicked tenants. In the parable of the two sons, we contrast the behaviors of two sons. One son says he will obey his father, but doesn't do it. The other son says he will not obey his father, but does anyway. Then Jesus, Matthew's Jesus, compares the Jewish religious leaders to the second son who talk a good game, but are disobedient. And Jesus compares tax collectors and prostitutes to the first son, who do not talk a good game, but are penitent and faithful. The parable is clear. Matthew is saying the current Jewish leaders are wrong, and Jesus' followers were right. And if that's not clear enough, that is followed by the parable of the wicked tenants. The parable is, of course, an allegory. In the allegory, the landowner is God, and the original tenants are the Jewish people. The tenants disrespect the landowner and disrespect the landowner's son. So the landowner kicks them out and gives the vineyard to other people. So when you fill in the blanks for who are the characters in the story, the tenants, who represent Jewish people, do not respect the landowner, who is God, even to the point of killing messengers, prophets, and killing the son, Jesus. So God kicks out the tenants and gives the vineyard to people who will respect him, which are followers of Jesus in Matthew's mind. To quote from Matthew, "Therefore I tell you, the kingdom of God will be taken away from you and given to a people that produces the fruits of the kingdom." I suspect when Matthew crafted these stories, what they really described was a rift between two Jewish communities, ones who thought Jesus was Messiah and ones who did not. But sadly, over time, the Jesus group, of course, morphed into a new religion that we call Christianity. And the meaning of the story of the wicked parables evolved to describe how Christians replaced Jews as God's chosen people. That idea is called supersessionism because Christians superseded Jews as the recipients of God's grace. It's also called replacement theology because Christians replaced Jews as God's chosen people. And the Christians are, and I haven't heard this phrase in decades, but I've heard Christians say it, that we are the new Jew. And of course, I stand against all of those ideas because they're deeply anti-Semitic and they're hateful and they're just completely wrong anyway. And all this happened in Matthew because Matthew insisted that Jesus was a Jewish Messiah when Jesus was not. And so he condemned many people. Matthew's choice led to massive amounts of anti-Semitism and the killing of many people on both sides for 2,000 years. Matthew's words, and there are other words in the New Testament, have been used to endorse Christian anti-Semitism for centuries. But as I said earlier, that is wrong. Matthew was not looking at the Jesus right in front of his face. Matthew made a choice that is wrong. As I said in Chit Chat this week, you are free to choose, but you're not free from the consequences of your choices. Matthew made a choice, but we have been given the choice today of choosing differently. Among other things, I hope that this Holy Week we will look with a little bit more openness towards our Jewish neighbors. Christians do not need to replace anybody, and we don't need a Jewish Messiah either. What choices have you made that led to poor outcomes? What choices have you made that led to good outcomes? We all have the gift of choosing, and often we have the gift of choosing again later and choosing differently as we continue to learn and grow. As I said, this reflection will continue next week, not only to discuss the gift of choice, but the gift of where our choices can take us. And I'm sorry to end kind of at a low point in the sermon, but that's kind of how it works. But as we rapidly move before Easter, consider, what new life are you looking for? What resurrection do you need in your own life? The journey of Holy Week is a great time to reconsider new choices. Consider new life. Consider resurrection. To be continued. Amen.